Well, hello there. Welcome back to Brambleberry. Today, I'm doing it's a little bit of a different video than I usually do on this channel. A lot of my videos are just me doing things, filming as I go, throwing it up there. This one, I'm trying to put a little bit more thought into. Not that I guess I don't put a lot of thought into the other ones. I just kind of do them. This one today is going to be lessons that I've learned doing DIY solar. It's been probably close to a year now that we've had our solar setup operating. Getting close to a year anyway. And so I thought it'd be good to kind of recap and go over some of the things that I've learned in the process. As with most things that are DIY, you kind of learn from your mistakes. So I'm hoping that if this is something that you want to do, setting up your own solar off-grid, that maybe you can learn from some of my mistakes. Because there are things that I did make mistakes on. There are things that I would have done a little differently. I don't know if I would have a do-over on the whole thing, but knowing what I know now, I would have done things a little differently. So come along and let's talk. So the first thing is the use of conditioned spaces for your equipment. So since we're off grid and we haven't built a house yet, we don't really have a conditioned space to keep all of that other than our camper, and we're already kind of pressed for space. So if you've watched my previous videos, you know that I built a little shed to keep the equipment in. By the equipment, I mean the batteries, inverter, charge controller, all that kind of stuff. And that stuff can function okay in an unconditioned space, I guess, but only to a certain point. The batteries, they can't, if it depends on the batteries, the type of batteries you use, but generally speaking, when batteries get cold, they don't perform as well. With the lithium batteries that I'm using, you can't really operate them below freezing, so below 32 degrees. Otherwise, they could get damaged even. These particular ones, they shut off even when they get that cold. So we did have, times this year when we were well below that. So I had to come up with a solution to that. That was not something that I really knew about, prior to doing all this. So just know that it's easier if you do have a conditioned space to keep them in, and they actually perform better in a conditioned space. If things like to stay the same, I should say. If you have big fluctuations going from hot to cold and back and forth, that's when you get condensation that builds up. It's not good for your equipment. The inverter doesn't like that kind of stuff either. It can actually operate at a wider temperature range than the batteries can, but it's the fluctuations. Fingers crossed, I haven't had any issues with that in my solar shed. But I did have to put a heater system on my batteries to keep them from getting too cold. I did notice too that my batteries, when they did get super cold, they lost charge a lot more quickly, like they discharged quickly, because they just weren't as efficient. There's kind of an optimum range of temperature where they work the best, so you want to kind of keep them around that temperature. I'm sure there's data and stuff out there to show what that optimum temperature is. In my experience, I've been trying to keep mine on cold days somewhere between the 45-50 degree mark. That seems to have worked well for me. I'm not saying that is, as you know, this is me figuring things out as I go. I'm not saying that is the optimum temperature, but that's worked well for us. So conditioned spaces are definitely good for your equipment to be in. So the next thing I learned from this whole process is that really, in most cases, bigger is better. I'm already thinking about ways to expand my solar array and working on those. One of the reasons why, though, is because I underestimated the number of solar panels that I could actually use with my inverter. That's something that you have to figure out, or not your inverter, actually with your charge controller. You can't overload your charge controller. You don't want to burn it up. Your solar panels aren't going to put out as much as you think they are, in my experience. They have a rating on them for certain parameters. Sometimes they'll put that out. Sometimes they won't put that out. It just kind of depends on lots of factors. The temperature outside, it depends on the angle of the sun, the time of the year. There's lots of things that go into it. You could set it up so that you can turn certain parts of your array on and off, so that at times of the year when you get less sun, you can turn on more panels to try to get more energy out. I have not gone down that route, though I'm thinking about experimenting with it. So that's something to consider. But as far as the panels go, yeah, have as many panels as you can possibly fit on your array, because you're going to want every last little bit of sun you can get, especially when you come up upon a whole string of cloudy days. Speaking of cloudy days, this is not one of them. Thank goodness, we've had a whole string of them here lately. But with this idea of bigger being better, that also applies to your battery bank. Now, whenever I started putting together my plan for this setup, I kind of tried to figure out what our usage was going to be and size our battery bank based upon that. I did the best I could, but really, I didn't do that good of a job. I thought I was actually oversizing, and ends up I could probably do with another maybe 2 batteries than what I have. And that's kind of unfortunate, but we're making it work with what we got. We'll expand eventually. Part of the issue that I didn't know, and this is a lesson learned, is that you can only discharge your lithium batteries to a certain point before it starts to do damage to them. I think that point's somewhere around the 25% mark. Then you only have access to 75% of that, really, that's usable, because you can't keep pulling it out or it's going to damage your batteries when it gets too low. So that means your capacity is going to be 75% of whatever your batteries say their total capacity is. So that's a thing. And honestly, from what I've read and understand, it's really better if you kind of keep your batteries between the 25 mark and the 75-80% mark, like up and down like that. If you charge them way up and just charge them all the way down, from what I understand, that's harder on them. And keep in mind, I'm no expert on this. This is just things I've read. This is my own experience. As always, do your own research. But the key takeaway from this is that your battery capacity is probably going to need to be bigger than what you think it needs to be. You have a whole string of cloudy days, like we just had, probably a whole week of them in a row, and it takes you, one day to charge your batteries up, and then you use all that in one day. Well, your battery bank is not big enough. It needs to be, if you want to get through those 7 days, it needs to be like 7 times bigger than what you had set it up to be. So just keep that in mind. Bigger is better, especially when it comes to the batteries. But it also matters with the panels, because if you don't have the array to charge all those up, then yeah, it's all got to work together. It's got to be sized together properly. Another thing to think about, especially if you're trying to do the off-grid thing and eventually build a house and all that kind of stuff, is that your consumption is going to change. It's changed for us pretty substantially just since we moved out here. When we got out here, we just had the trailer. Since we've been here, we've added a washer and a dryer, both of which have, the dryer is propane, so it doesn't use as much electricity, but it uses a pretty good amount to run the drum and to ignite the propane. The washer uses quite a bit too to run it. Water consumption has not been a big deal for us. That's another thing too, is that, we have a whole separate solar setup now just for our water, which is pretty important. I don't think I would put my solar well, I don't think I'd put my well setup on the same solar as the rest of my equipment and stuff, because you want to always have your water. It needs to be on its own dedicated thing, because there's been a lot of times where, we've been using a lot of energy, not paying attention to it. Our batteries deplete, we don't have power, then we're not going to have water. So we had to kick the generator on, charge everything back up. So it's good to have that on a separate one. But anyway, so we've added the washer and the dryer. We also have a deep freeze on it now, which it doesn't have a huge power consumption, but it's adds up. Now we have a bunch of Wi-Fi connected devices. We have a router. All those don't pull a whole lot, but it all adds up. That's the point of this, And so the more you build your homestead, the more your power consumption needs are going to go up. And it doesn't matter, I don't think, how much. I mean, it does matter if you try to keep those down and you try to do things without power, but power is helpful. It makes things easier. So you want to use it to make things easier for you. For instance, all the Wi-Fi connected stuff that we have, it's so helpful. Some of you may go, I don't want internet, I don't want to deal with all that, but it is so helpful for us to be able to monitor things when we're not here, because our homestead is out in the middle of nowhere, and we don't know, who's going to be coming out here doing, who knows what, stealing things. We want to keep an eye on things. In the wintertime, we want to make sure there's heat so that our water doesn't freeze up. We had issues with that. So it's really important. Electricity is really important out here, and having a reliable source for it is important. But just know that as you build, your consumption is going to go up. So what you plan for at first is probably not going to be anywhere near what you need in the long run. So make your system one that you can expand out and make bigger. The next thing that you probably need to look at is the average sunny days in your area, which is different all across, the world, basically. Weather patterns change, and it's not it isn't the same. It just depends on where you're at. But you can look up that data online and figure out what it's like in your particular area. And you need to size your system based on that. If you don't have a lot of sunny days in your area, then you're going to have a bigger system, because when you do have sunny days, you're going to want to gather as much power that you can to last through to the next day. And the other thing that's kind of related to this is that positioning your panels matters. If you look behind me, there's a big tree. Well, right now I am standing out in front of my panels, and it's almost noon. 1 o'clock is getting to be about the best time of day for collecting solar energy in my area. But this tree behind me, even though it doesn't have leaves on it, is going to come right across my panels, and it's going to cast a little bit of shade. And any little bit of shade is going to knock down the efficiency of your panels. And you may think, oh, well, it's just a little bit. But that little bit, if it affects your whole system, it may take you down a couple of 100 watts even just for that little bit of shade that goes across your panels. So positioning them is important. You're probably going to have to cut some trees out. We have been considering that, but we love our trees, so we've just been dealing with it. We've taken some out, but it's something to consider. You need a big wide open area for your panels. And of course, angling them, most people know that, you need to angle them properly for the time of year. You can angle them so that they're the best all year round, but you're going to lose out on some power, I think. At least that's what I found out now, because I tried that at first, and I had to re-angle mine this winter because I was not getting hardly anything with the year-round angle on the panels. So panel placement and angle and all that stuff is super important to consider, and how many sunny days there are for your area. This next thing is kind of something that I already knew, but I feel like I should share anyway, and that is that you need to have some kind of electrical knowledge if you're going to do this. And if you don't have it, you need to learn it. As I've said many times in my videos, I'm not an electrician, and I don't claim to be an electrician. I have a working knowledge of some of this stuff, and I put it to use, and I made it work. And when I didn't know something, I looked for the answers. And you can do that too. It's not impossible, but you do need to have a basic knowledge of how electric works to make this work. This is a little more complicated actually than just wiring up for a household, because you're talking about two forms of energy. You have direct current and you have alternating current. And the direct current is what the panels are putting out, and it's what your batteries are working off of. And you have different voltages that you could be using. You know, there's 12 volt systems, there's 24 volt systems, there's 48 volt systems, and you need to know what kind you want to use based on your application. The higher the voltage gets, the more dangerous it gets, so you have to be careful with that. 12 volt is not quite as dangerous. You know, you can get zapped with 12 volt. You probably have had that happen to you. That's what all of our cars run off of. And that's not as bad, but when you get up to 48 volt, you're starting to get a little bit more dangerous there. Mine's a 24 volt system, so it's not quite as bad. But anyway, you need to have a healthy respect for this stuff, and you need to kind of have an idea of what you're doing. That's just the DC side. When you get to alternating current side, then you're talking about stuff that's a lot more dangerous actually. Alternating current. You don't want to play with that. You need to be very careful with alternating current. But that's what your house or your camper or whatever that you're powering is probably going to be using, is alternating current. And that's what this box, you need to know how to wire up a distribution panel, all that kind of stuff, to make use of the power that you're generating. So it helps. It doesn't help. It's pretty imperative that you have an idea of how electric stuff works. And then I think the last lesson that I learned that I want to share with you today is that you should have backups. Don't think, oh, I'm going to build this big solar array and have all these batteries and I'm going to generate all my power and everything's going to be grand. It's always going to work. No. If you live on the grid, you know that the electric doesn't always work. Sometimes the power goes out, and guess what? You have to wait for the electric company to fix the power. Sometimes you have things go wrong within your house, and you have to call an electrician out to fix it. When you are living off grid using solar, you are the electrician. You are the power company. So if something goes wrong, guess what? You have to fix it, or you have to have a backup so that you have power. If you don't want to have power, and you don't care, then I guess you don't need a backup. Whenever we first came out here, we had one generator, and that generator quit on us one night. And this was before we actually, well, it's actually when we first started like coming out here part-time, and we didn't have solar yet. And so it was then I thought I need a backup generator. So I got a smaller one just in case, you know. That one failed on me as well. I had to take it back, get another one. So my backup failed. I got my first one working again. So we had two after I got the second one. So we had two generators for a while. We put the solar in. We were using them for a while, and then one of those generators failed. So I had to get another generator. So now I have three generators. One of them actually runs off of either unleaded or propane, which I have not had to use the propane, but in the spirit of having backups, I just wanted something that I could use 2 different fuel sources on in case I ran out of one or the other. But we have had to use our generator quite a bit this winter just because of my miscalculations, as I've already talked about with my solar array and the battery bank size that we have. We've had to use a lot of gas. So that's just something that when you DIY it, you gotta live with it and you gotta deal with it. But if anything in your solar setup fails, you need to have a backup, and that's a generator, if not multiple generators that you can use. Otherwise, you may find yourself without power. And if it's a nice day, you may not care. But if it's in the dead of winter and it's 2 outside, then you care if you have power or not. So, but anyway, that's the last thing I'll mention there. And I hope this has been helpful to you. It's just things that I've, run into, come across as I've been doing this whole thing. And if I have more things, I'll certainly share them in the future. If you have put in your own DIY solar setup and you have words of wisdom and advice that you would like to share with people, please leave them in the comments. That's one of the reasons I do this channel. Obviously, it's to share our experience. It's kind of like a video log for us, and it's kind of fun, but it's also to share knowledge and to gain knowledge too. So if you have something to share, please leave it in the comments. And also, when you do leave a comment, if you can't say something nice, maybe don't say it at all. That gets really aggravating. I don't know why people are like that. Yeah. Be nice. We're all learning, me included. You don't have to be a jerk. Anyway, I hope you have a fabulous day, and I thank you for watching. Bye. Ruthie cat, what are you doing?